The Joker. Love him or hate him, he's one of the most recognizable villains in Batman's rogues gallery. And as a result, many villains can find themselves weighed against him, whether it makes sense to do so or not. This phenomenon brings us to the interesting case of Mr. Bloom, a villain who, when he does pop up or is discussed, is often highlighted for his botanical Slenderman-esque vibe. It's a look, or the idea that he was potentially underrated. But his initial appearance during the first arc in which he was heavily featured bore an interesting tagline. It popped up and continues to be used as a bit of a note, a blurb sometimes depending upon where he's being described on various wikis or the like. And that is that one of his creators, Scott Snyder, labeled him as the anti-Joker. That little tagline led me to dig a bit deeper, to discover what was the rationale, the context, and did it make sense? Especially as pertaining to Mr. Bloom. It fascinates me. I wanted to explore it. Does it actually apply to Mr. Bloom? Or was the question of snappy verbiage meant to help market the character? Was it something else entirely? And if it doesn't apply to Mr. Bloom, what would an anti-Joker look like / be like? I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics. Let's explore whether or not Mr. Bloom is indeed the anti-Joker. Now, before we do that, of course, we need to situate both characters so that we can compare them against each other. Needing less of an introduction, we're going to start off with the Clown Prince of Crime, who debuted in Batman #1 back in 1940. He was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. He very quickly became a recurring foe for the Dark Knight. He died in the first issue and was rapidly brought back, which had become one of the staples of the character. Or rather, he was set to die, and then they had to add some panels to show that he didn't die. That knife to the heart, he was fine. The visual dichotomy between the characters was instantly striking, and over time, the contrast would extend to their personalities and worldviews as well. From the over-the-top and at times outlandish, with an edge of silly, but also murder, of the Golden Age, to the near vanishing in the Silver Age because of the Comics Code, to a burst of resurgence as a killer in the Bronze, and then growing ever darker still in the lead up to and post-Crisis, the Joker has certainly evolved over time. However, one core thing has remained consistent. He is an agent of chaos, an unpredictable character with a penchant towards a hyperfixation on Batman. The depth and breadth of his history at times can make him hard to define, but there have been many attempts to explain his shifts in personality, looks, modus operandi. So canon has tackled this a couple of times, a variety of ways. You've had things like hypersanity, a confused and muddled memory, literally multiple versions. So the Joker can be a bit slippery to pin down at times, but that in and of itself matches his core energy of chaos. Now we must define Mr. Bloom, and for this we need to take a bit more time to do it because we need to situate more of him. People aren't in general as familiar with Mr. Bloom as the Joker, so we need to explore his many facets for the purpose of examining the ideas to be shared later surrounding his anti-Jokerness or lack thereof. With all that said, Mr. Bloom. The character was created during the New 52 era of comics, but close to the end. The New 52 was a line-wide reboot DC implemented in 2011, which saw many changes to the status quo for certain characters. It altered the timeline, it removed much of the legacy characters, and some things just felt and looked very different. Mr. Bloom debuted in Batman 43 in 2015, which places his genesis during the landscape of the DCU, that's YOU, and a little before Rebirth, which would be a soft reboot that would see some of the pre-New 52 continuity re-enter the universe. Mr. Bloom was created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, and was the main antagonist of the Super Heavy arc, which was a very important arc as it would see the return of Bruce Wayne as Batman. Following the events of Joker Endgame, Bruce had died, but he came back, but he didn't fully remember being Batman. So he started a new life where he was helping the youth and underprivileged of Gotham. But while Bruce was off doing that, he was replaced by Jim Gordon as Batman, who also had some help, like Julia Pennyworth and others. Gordon was also trying to navigate a partnership with Jerry Powers, who wanted a bunch of Robo-Batmen patrolling Gotham. He was also balancing his growing belief that Batman needed to operate outside the law in order to function. We need all of this information because it's going to matter to how Mr. Bloom is presented and positioned inside this story. Now, unlike the Joker, who has hundreds of stories to his name, Mr. Bloom pretty much has this arc, at least inside of the main canon. His appearance years later in Task Force Z, it's operating in a bit of an interesting state canon-wise, and they take the character in a bit of a different direction. That's also the arc where he's described as a nervous pooper, so we can just put that in a corner, in a little box over there. With that in its box, what did Mr. Bloom do in this Super Heavy arc? Mr. Bloom is introduced through Impact first, revealed to be the seller or distributor of special seeds that grant the users powers. That is, if they implant them under the skin in some way. You gotta get them all up inside you. Throughout the arc, he clashes with both Batmen, first Gordon and later Bruce. The devastation he wreaks on the city and its people is what forces Bruce to take up his mantle once more. So Mr. Bloom is significant in that sense. Mr. Bloom is quickly revealed to have powers himself, as in issue 43 he survives a shot to the head from Penguin, and is able to extend parts of his body, particularly his fingers, to disturbing lengths and to deadly effect. Also, the flower on his mask at times is revealed to be more of a sentient moving flower, and its petals or thorns can shoot out. One shot where the thorny thing goes through people's ears, pretty cool. Revealed to be a metahuman, Mr. Bloom crashes a press conference to pontificate about how much he is taking true action in the city in contrast to the elite. All of you good folk who toil so relentlessly to make Gotham better, make it exactly what it is today. You know, I was one of you once. A bleeding heart. A soldier for Gotham, like you, Commissioner Sawyer, trying to grow a new police force right out of your shoulders. Or all of you community activists, growing programs for children out of your arms, giving them hope, real hope. Here's to all of you, I mean it. Your efforts, your whole lives actually, are the rich fertilizer of this great city. Maybe I am talking about lawn maintenance after all. You give yourselves over to Gotham so that amazing things may grow here. Things like me. Bloom is able to evade capture through the use of his vaguely defined meta abilities, and eventually is revealed to have planted seeds, or hidden them rather, all over the city, as well as having amassed an army of followers willing to act in his name. It's also revealed that the more people use these seeds, the more power is funneled towards him. They don't really dive into the fact that he may be manipulating people in order to do this, but it's there for those who want to read it that way. But there's a lot of other things going on with how you're meant to read Mr. Bloom. There's a lot of attempted depth added to him that doesn't quite land. But as for the extra power being added to him through these seeds, he's able to channel it into a collider to blow up all Gotham and maybe more. And we also get to see during the end of this arc him exposit more about his philosophy. It's one of those things that works on the surface, but as soon as you dig a little deeper, pun intended, then it starts to fall apart. Yes, Gotham is going down today. The garden will rot. Because what is a garden, really? But a big, beautiful lie. It's just a natural plot of land, unnaturally twisted and whipped and reshaped to look pretty from far away. But the thing about a garden, if you ever get up close to one, it's warfare, folks. Plants that don't belong next to each other. Wildflowers that are born combatants living side by side, vying for water, for sunlight. I mean, if you've planted it wrong. It's robbery and murder, gang life in slow, slow motion. In a garden, the gardeners pretend to take care of you. Look how pretty they make your lives. The police shoot you unarmed, then shoot you again and again. Your politicians, they take your money and let you wither. Business poisons you. They say you can do well here, but you're poor as hell, aren't you? Say it. Damn all of them. There's only me. Say it, because the city was built on divisions, dead flower dolls. Gotham isn't a garden, it never was. It's a wild, bloody meadow, so stop wasting your lives. Don't take the pennies, come to the land of giants. Go get what's yours, get it, and let what's here die as it should, and grow something wonderful in its place. This story will stretch this garden metaphor to the max. But if you don't think about it too hard, it's meant to be kind of a naturalist, anarchist perspective. Where's Poison Ivy when you need her? This plan does not go well for Bloom. Batman's return causes the people to yank the seeds out from them, so that whole go and get what you want for yourself, that falls apart as soon as Batman shows up, because Batman will protect them, so they don't have to get things for themselves. And I don't think that that's the way that it was meant to be read, but that's the way it's presented. It's not as positive a welcome back message for Batman as it seems to be intended as. That's one of the things, like, you could read this as Mr. Bloom's philosophy isn't meant to make sense, but they linger on it so long and keep going on with it that it appears that no, it is meant to be something that's very deep, incredible, because they're trying to apply the garden thing as an allegory more than as a metaphor, because they're being so direct with the comparison. Bloom and the OG Batman fight, and Bloom pulls a "we're the same, you and I," which of course they never are. I'm telling you, Batman, we want the same things for this city. We want people to all right then, last chance, join me and we'll make Gotham something amazing. Everyone out for him or herself, the way it should be, savage but fair. Would you say? So keep all of this in your head in case it comes up for the Joker discussion, because then you can have this philosophy versus the Joker's philosophy. Bloom is thrown into the destructive super collider star of his own making and explodes. And now the Garden of Gotham can return to some kind of equilibrium. Now the final piece before we look at the whole anti-Joker concept for Mr. Bloom is his origin, which is defined inside of this arc. It is revealed in Batman 50 that Daryl Gutierrez, a seemingly heroic character we've been following, had been the original Mr. Bloom, that in the wake of Year Zero, he had created the Bloom power seeds, but it had gone wrong. So he had tried again years later after the Joker attack to have this plan come to fruition where he would give people superpowers, and then he would be a hero called Mr. Bloom, giving the people the power to elevate themselves. In order to do this, he began to experiment on the unidentified victims of the Joker attack. You know, like heroes do. It gets real dark here, and they don't fully come back to it. One of his seeds in one of these anonymous people works. He doesn't even know which one it worked for. And that person takes Daryl's mask, his name, and in Daryl's mind, his glory. Because as mentioned, he was planning to emerge as a superhero. And now instead, this person has emerged just looking to destroy everything. So that is the canon explanation for Mr. Bloom. But what about the metatextual? What about his creation as through the mouths and minds of his creators? There was a lot of thought behind Mr. Bloom, which is why it's also fascinating to examine the anti-Joker statement, because it doesn't come up right away. And there was some build up to Mr. Bloom in terms of excitement because of his design that was coming out. And also at the time, we were getting lots of interviews issue by issue at around the time of this arc. A lot of the discussion centered around the design, as it can be set up to this day that that is his strongest attribute. However, initially, the artist Greg Capullo had a bit of a hard time coming up with the creep factor for this character, because Snyder approached him with, he's got to have a flower on his face. And like many, Capullo had a more positive association with flowers, not really scary. He stated, I just couldn't see the creep factor. But one of the things that Scott kept saying was that he was like a weed, so I wanted to pursue that angle. I thought I could make that look creepy. I did some doodles with some kind of featureless mask, but there were weeds growing all over it, and it looked like some kind of strange bride's veil. It was creepy. That does sound creepy. But Scott kept pushing towards the flower direction, and then he showed me some predatory looking flowers with heads almost like teeth, and we eventually got there. Now I can see the creep factor. Snyder was always attached to the idea of Mr. Bloom as a weed. Snyder stated, you have a villain that grows like a weed in the cracks, the chasms that grow between different communities, between rich and poor, between different races, different classes, all of that. And that's what makes Mr. Bloom so scary. He's a reflection of what can go very wrong. That's more vague than it sounds. He can happen between any group, anytime. So with all of that said, where does this anti-Joker idea come in? Where does it come from? Is it because he's in an all-black beat poetry outfit featuring mesh gloves? Is it because he's positioned as philosophically opposed to Gordon? Or Gordon's Batman, rather, with whom he has a conflict? His whole burn it down thing can be seen to align with the Joker, depending upon which Joker you're dealing with. If the Joker cares about society at all in that iteration, which isn't always the case. Well, this concept comes from a very specific source, an interview from 2015, during the, at the time, upcoming issue 44. In this interview, the interviewer asked a very specific question, and it involved a comparison to the Joker. Because as mentioned at the beginning of this video, for many, the Joker is the benchmark by which Batman villains are measured. The question was, this issue sort of served as an origin story for Mr. Bloom, but it seemed like you were still trying to avoid revealing too much about the character and his true nature. Do you think he's like Joker in that sense, that he works better with an element of mystery? So this question is incredibly leading in many ways. It already has the base assumption that the Joker works better with an aura of mystery, which while many may agree with that assessment, there's now a bit of an onus on the person answering to frame their answer through that lens, which is what we're about to see happen. The answer to this question gets fairly convoluted. It's a long one, but I feel you need all of it to grasp what's going on. So here we go. Snyder stated, in some ways, I feel like he's anti-Joker in another way, where Joker has no origin because almost any origin wouldn't be sufficient for how large he's become and how terrifying he is as a character. Giving him an origin would almost cheapen him. Whereas the thing with Mr. Bloom so far, and I'm not saying we won't give him an origin or reveal who he is, the anonymity to this point serves this idea that he's almost an inversion of that. He's the Joker for Jim Gordon in that he could be almost anybody. What's scary about Mr. Bloom is that anybody disaffected enough or angry enough at things not working and the machine of Gotham breaking down could become Mr. Bloom with the right push. No origin could be good enough for how big and scary the Joker is, whereas for Mr. Bloom, almost any origin could be good enough. He could come from anywhere. It feels like there are several different things being said here that don't necessarily connect or present the idea that Mr. Bloom is indeed an inversion or anti-Joker. So what are the things being said? 1. No origin will be good enough for the Joker because he's too scary and big to have one adequate to the scale to which he has grown. So that's one fact. Although one must also think about the idea that if one is reading this and they have familiarity with the Joker, they're also going to be coming into this answer with that. So some may be thinking about the fact that while that may be the case or the thought, even if they agree with it, the Joker does have several origins, and the tacitly agreed upon one is the Killing Joke. And since time has gone on, he now just has more. 2. Mr. Bloom's anonymity is what makes him the Joker to Jim Gordon, because he could be anybody. The thing with that is that if the Joker has no origin, or shouldn't, couldn't he also be anybody? So then they're also not inversions in that sense. 3. Mr. Bloom is scary because anybody could be Mr. Bloom with the right push. So Joker is scarier if you keep him anonymous. Mr. Bloom is scary because he's anonymous. Again, not an inversion. 4. The most direct attempt to make this statement. No origin would be good enough for the Joker, but any would be good enough for Mr. Bloom. But why though? The thing is, when contemplating the idea of an anti-Joker, one's mind will tend to be flooded with what they do know about the Joker. I do really understand the sentiment of the Joker having an origin cheapening him, but as mentioned, he also exists in the wake of several, and many would argue it's overexposure rather than those origins that have done him more damage. All of the above statements make sense individually, but if combined to create some kind of statement about how Mr. Bloom is an inversion or anti-Joker, they don't really hold up. But it makes sense why this answer is so all over the place, because the base question kind of led it that way. The question was, do you think, like the Joker, this character works better with a sense of mystery? And if you read through all of this answer, the answer to that is yes. There's a central mystery surrounding the anonymity of each character that is key to both in Snyder's estimation. But that has nothing to do with them being an inversion. I think he was just trying to say that Mr. Bloom is different than the Joker, which is obviously what you'd want to say for a new character you created. You don't want people to be like, oh, this is just some other kind of Joker. The Joker's origin has little to do with why he is or isn't scary. It's also not all that central. And it's the same with Mr. Bloom, really. The core scare factor coming from Mr. Bloom is again from that design. When it comes to his philosophy and what he's espousing, the scarier factor isn't really delved into, which is the fact that he's influencing all these people with some of their deep concerns and fears, turning them against each other to gain power for himself. But it's not really presented as if you're meant to read it like that. The philosophy needed a bit more time to cook. Because at base, if you take it on the surface, it's very boilerplate. Break the chains of society, because systems are broken, so why live in a system? Burn it down. Some people just want to watch the world burn. Oh no, they're the same again. The coolest part of him are those Lovecraftian elements in his design and the way he utilizes them. The style and scale of him makes him seem like some nightmarish creature from another realm, and that juxtaposition with the ordinary, and at times more cheerful looking parts of him, the flower, the black skinny jeans, it's jarring and they make him seem way more out of place. And again, his influence, the way that people are accepting of those seeds, the fact that he's spreading his seed, just looking at it that way. One of the scariest scenes is where the child who's at the center that Bruce is working at with Julie Madison, she's so traumatized by what's happened and Mr. Bloom that she accepts the seed and transforms in front of them, and that scene's really terrifying. So again, the impact that Mr. Bloom and his philosophy are having on the city is scary, but that's not so much explored. In regards to the anti-Joker, it wasn't the best question, as a result doesn't get the best answer. But the phrase anti-Joker is cool. I don't think it was intended as some kind of let's market him that way, but it's just a quick, no, he's not the Joker, but it does sound cool. It's a nice turn of phrase. It made me ponder just what or who a true anti-Joker would be, because it's not Mr. Bloom. And if you wanted to say it was that, it wouldn't come because of their origins, because when people think about the Joker, while they may discuss his origins, that's not really the core of the character. Mr. Bloom was one of the last big villains of the New 52, and he did have more potential than was utilized here, but he needed a bit more development, a bit more things to make him feel separate from something that could be done with Poison Ivy. The name The Joker is good for SEO though, so I can see how it became an article headline, then people just quickly skim and they add things to wikis, so the evolution of how this got here made sense, and it really is just a blip, but it fascinated me. You know, I love to go deep into these things. How'd they happen? But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Do you think Mr. Bloom was underrated? Do you think he could have been an anti-Joker in other ways? Or do you agree with the anti-Joker because of origin thesis? Is Scott Snyder playing chess and I'm planting a garden? Your thoughts, I want to hear them. Please put them down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking Spider-Man to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.